Doom the Dark Ages is here, though sadly without Mick Gordon because of reasons. And it's a real shame because what he did with the music, and specifically what he built with the Doom synth sound, contributed a lot to both Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. So I thought this would be a great time to try and recreate what he did within Renoise. If you're thinking that's probably a tall order, well, thankfully there is a resource available in the form of his 2017 GDC talk, which is going to help out a lot with this. If you haven't watched it, do give it a watch. Mick is an engaging, entertaining speaker, and he speaks about more than just the subject of this video. Anyway, one of the first things we're told is quite surprising. The source for all of the sounds, that is the Doom synth sound, not the guitars or anything else, you know the one I mean. The source is just a simple sine wave. So you're taking a pure tone and mangling, grinding, crushing it with various effects to create something new that sounds entirely different. So I've actually got layered on two sine samples. There's a chip sine, which is about as basic as it gets, and there's a DH kick impact room, which has a bit of its own character already present, and both of these come included with Renoise. But we're also going to affect them with the modulation section to give it a bit more character and also the opportunity for me to control things. The chip sine doesn't have its own attack, so that's added here in the volume section with an AHDSR, and there's also the release, which is controlled by the second macro here. That allows me to extend the note out whenever I want, and this affects that second sample too. The first sample also jumps in pitch, which helps with the biting attack there. And, crucially, both of them also have a filter added. The first sample uses a distortion shape, and the second has the comb filter. And for this, the feedback is controlled by that first macro, and for the first sample, it's the amount of distortion. And this gives me a bit of extra control over the shape of the sine wave before it enters into the effects. And that leads into the most important piece of information that we're given in the video, this slide. It is 4 different effects chains, all sourced from the sine wave, although it's labelled as CPU at the top here, and then they combine together with a mixer and EQ and compressor at the end. And we're given the names of the individual pedals or descriptions of what other things do, and there's a major problem here already. They're all bloody hardware. So the chances of me being able to replicate exactly what he's doing is pretty much zero. But that's fine. If I actually wanted to grab a couple of these pedals to try them out and see what they sound like, maybe not then. So this is really about honouring the spirit of what Mick's going for. Sourcing from a pure sound and then really mangling it with different effects chains that all sound very different, and then exercising intricate control to create my own unique sound. It's something I'm already familiar with. Let's have a look at what I've built with these effects chains. The first one is of course the original sound, and that is sent to the first 3 effects chains. And then we have a little construction here, and what happens is if there's not much use of the other effects chains, then a lot of the original sound is kept. But if there's a lot of use of the other effects chains, then the amount of the original sound is lowered. And at the end is something that's common to the other effects chains, which is sound from an effects chain will be sent to feedback. We'll get to that in a minute. And then also to the final output, where it will encounter that final equalization and compression. So on the first effects chain, it's a heavy amount of distortion, then 2 cabinet simulators. These are doing a lot of heavy lifting wherever they're present. They're complicated effects, come with their own amplifier, equalizer, as well as a distinct style of cabinet that they're simulating. A lo-fi mat, you might know this as a bit crusher, then a compressor to bring down the peaks and raise the lower level details, and a signal follower. You'll find this in the Distortions effects chain as well. And what this does is measuring the volume that's coming through here up to this point, and then changing the amount of the signal that is being sent to the feedback effects chain, because that one's special. Now back to the lo-fi mat, because what the macro does is not just raise the amount of volume that's running through here. At the higher levels of the macro, as you can see from the exponential scaling, it doesn't really do much up to about 50%, but after that it'll really start degrading the sound by lowering the bit crunch, lowering the sample rate, and the amount of the dry mix, which is the audio that's coming into the effect. And that really chips away at the sound. Now into the Distortions effects chain, starting with a flanger using the trusty old Wanderer settings, a distortion, and then an analog filter to take off any of those nasty high frequencies that may have been brought about by this particular distortion. Ring mod, that's a classic. Another distortion using heavy settings, and an analog filter again doing the same thing. Then the compressor and the signal follower, same as the previous effects chain. Now back to that first distortion. Unlike the cabinets effects chain, where I built in the changes to the macro, what I want is to be able to have control over the drive of this distortion at any point, regardless of what the FX2 macro is doing. The reason I want to do this is because it's in fold mode, which shoves the audio back towards the DC line and creates a very distinctive sound. And so the 8th macro controls that. Now with that 3rd effects chain, things really start to get interesting. Because what Mick shows us is that he's sending the audio out into the real world. What he has is a reel-to-reel tape machine, and then that comes back into distortion. He has a delay, and then he has a spring reverb. Now, I've no way of doing any of that, of course, but spring reverb is very interesting. I'd heard about this, but I wasn't really sure what it was. I thought it might just be a short drain-style reverb. But no, it's actually a very physical effect. You have an enclosed space, you send the audio into it, and there's literally springs in there, and they rattle around and create its own distinct reverb sound. Obviously can't do that, but within Renoise we do have the convolver, which is a way of melding together 2 different sounds so they take on the characteristics of each other. Normally it's used for reverbs, but you can actually load in any sound you want. And, as it happens, I have in the past recorded myself hitting and grinding springs. So that's what I've used here. There's other effects that feed into the convolver, most notably that first delay, where it exponentially raises the intensity of what it's doing as the macro is going higher. And so to the fourth effects chain, and you've probably noticed this is where I'm really deviating. It's because what's happening is he's sending the sound out to an amplifier with a microphone in front of it so that he can create feedback. Now, feedback is not something that you can actually create within Renoise. Certain effects have feedback properties, but that's contained entirely within the device. There is simply no way to send audio backwards in effects chains. So I've had to get very creative here. First is a sneaky way of detecting when a note has been released, since you don't want the feedback playing all the time. In the note off layer, I've got a dummy sample. It's not blank though. What's actually happening is that it's looped and it's playing at max volume. So the signal follower will detect when a note off has happened and then activate the feedback. And there's 3 different effects chains to really flesh out the sound that's created by the reverbs, repeaters, and most notably this ring mod, which will change the piercing sound that it's creating according to the note that's played. As well as the comb filter here, which changes what piercing tone it's creating according to the volume of the sound that's running through it. So that will change as the sound is playing and also as it's released. The feedback repeat is an optional effects chain which you can turn on with that second last macro, and what it does is it grabs onto the sound with the repeater and it has various effects around it to create that optional crunchy sound if you really want it. So how does this actually work out in practice? Not bad, I reckon. So I didn't go into as much detail for the feedback there. That's because there's just so much to cover, and also you can download the song and load it into Renoise yourself to have a look around and mess around with things. Link in the video description or below wherever I posted this. Both the doom sound and the drums are using phrases, and so you can easily swap out what's playing by switching to different phrases as they're playing on the available patterns. You might be thinking, well, you've gone to all this trouble to create this, why haven't you made and released music using it? And I do plan to. There's a couple of reasons I haven't done it yet. First is I don't want to create doom music. And as for the second, well, we'll come to that.